Do you like riddles? Well, I do, and I have one for you. What I'm going to do is I'm going to describe a person from history, a person that's known from the pages of the Bible. You're going to listen to the clues that I lay out, and if you choose to participate, you're going to try to figure out who it is that I'm describing. Are you ready? I'm a prophet. I'm from the Galilee. I died. I was brought back to life, and all people of the book consider my message to be one of forgiveness and universal salvation. Who am I? Who am I? I'm Ross, and I'm coming to you from the Athenaeum in Jackson, Louisiana, home of HOREB Institute for the Historical and Objective Research and Exploration of the Bible. Thank you for watching this video. I appreciate it. Now, back to our riddle. So, a Galilean prophet who dies, who's brought back to life, and all the people of the book consider his message and associate his message with one of forgiveness and universal salvation. Our riddle really has two solutions, not just one. One of the solutions is easy and obvious. The other solution, not so much. Not so much easy, not so much obvious. So I think what we'll do is we'll start, first of all, with the easy and obvious, and then we'll work our way to the more difficult puzzle, the more difficult solution, and you need to stick around because I think you're going to be surprised. Not with the easy and obvious. The easy and obvious, we're talking about the prophet from the Galilee that dies, he's raised back, and a message and so forth. We know that the easy and obvious answer to that is Jesus. Jesus is presented by all the gospel writers as coming from the Galilee. We have quite a few references. If we begin with a text in Matthew chapter 2 and verse 22, we meet immediately with the fact that God declares and warns Joseph to settle in the Galilee. And this is presumably to avoid an encounter with Archelaus. And then specifically, not just the Galilee, but to a town called Nazareth. Listen, in Matthew 2:22, it says the following. But when he heard that Archelaus was reigning over Judea in the room of his father Herod, he was afraid to go thither. And being warned of God in a dream, he withdrew into the parts of Galilee, and he came and dwelt in a city called Nazareth. So we find from this point forward in the Gospels, in all the Gospels, Jesus is associated with both the Galilee and with Nazareth. But this presents a problem to quite a few people. And the problem is this. Many have noticed a scarcity or even a lack of mention of Nazareth during the lifetime, the period associated with the life of Jesus. Let's say from 4 BC to 30 AD, or BCE, CE if you prefer. Now, to be precise and to make sure that I said this very clearly, contemporary sources, authors from the period, and I'm even including in that the first century historian by the name of Flavius Josephus, failed to mention Nazareth. Like it doesn't appear at all. It's very obviously missing. And this is really a problem, especially when it comes to the works of Josephus, because we know that Josephus is in charge of military regiment in the region of the Galilee. He knows this area like the back of his hands. He mentions more than 200 towns and villages in the region of the Galilee. And out of all those towns, and some of these are real close to where we believe, Nazareth would have been. And it's not mentioned at all. Our earliest epigraphic, our earliest epigraphic evidence of Nazareth was discovered at Caesarea in 1962. It was a marble slab, and on the marble slab is a list of priestly families. And among the priestly families on this marble plaque, basically, is a family that comes from Nazareth. And by the way, it's beyond the scope of this video, but it's in this particular plaque that we discover the true spelling, because some have debated the exact spelling in the original Hebrew of the name Nazareth. But be that as it may, this plaque dates to the 3rd or 4th century AD. So that's late. We don't have anything in our data that puts it further back than that. But let me say this too. Marginalizing the Galilee, and specifically Nazareth, is not just something that is the sole work of, let's say, a minimalist or a revisionist. No. Even our gospel writers, our primary sources that tell the story of Jesus, these which have every reason to glorify and magnify Nazareth above all other towns, they too make it sound as if it's viewed as insignificant. And this is in the Gospels. So let me give you an example. Look at John chapter 1, verses 45 and 46. It says, Philip findeth Nathanael and saith unto him, We have found him of whom Moses in the law and the prophets wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph. And Nathanael said unto him, Can anything good come out of Nazareth? And Philip saith unto him, and I like this, Come and see. So we get almost right out of the gate in the Gospel of John that we have Philip is very excited. He says, we found the guy, we found the Messiah. And he's from Nazareth. And that raises the suspicion of Nathanael. And the way he puts it is, can anything good come from Nazareth? So we get this sort of a stressing that it's not even that important among the people who are telling the story of the gospel. Let's look at another one. If you look at John chapter 7, in John chapter 7, there is a lively debate going on. It's presented as describing a situation in the streets. Jesus of Nazareth has certain people who are saying he's the Christ, he's the Messiah. And there are other people who are arguing that point. So if we look, let's begin in John 7, chapter 7, verse 41. You enter into this argument. Here it is. Others said, This is the Christ. But some said, What? Does the Christ come out of Galilee? Hath not the scripture said that Christ comes of the seed of David and from Bethlehem, the village where David was? So there arose a division in the multitude because of him. And some of them would have taken him, but no man laid hands on him. The officers, therefore, came to the chief priest and the Pharisees, and they said unto them, Why did you not bring him? And the officers answered, Never man so spake. The Pharisees therefore answered them, Are you also led astray? Has any of the rulers believed on him, or of the Pharisees? But this multitude that knows not the law are accursed. Nicodemus said unto them, he that came to him before, being one of them, Doth our law judge a man except it first hear for himself and know what he doeth? And they answered and said unto him, Art thou also of Galilee? Search and see that out of Galilee arises no prophet. So the debate as to where the Messiah comes from and whether or not Jesus fits the bill really comes down to the fact that he's from the Galilee. And we already heard in the Nathanael story where Philip and Nathanael are discussing, can anything good come out of this region? And here, this writer, this speaker says, no prophet ever came from the Galilee. I mean, search and see if there be any prophet from the Galilee. That's a pretty good rhyme. But is this true? Is it true that there are no other prophets from the region of the Galilee? What if we did search? What if we did look into the scriptures to see if there was any prophet that came from this area? Well, would we find a prophet? Well, I did search, and I did find. And what I found is minimal, but it's very, very important. It's a clue. It helps us to solve the riddle that we began with. And here it is. It comes from, according to the text, a singular reference of a prophecy that was spoken to a king by the name of Jeroboam, the son of Joash. Now, Jeroboam, son of Joash, is king of Israel, the northern kingdom. So this is set roughly in the 8th century BC. So I want to read a text. The clue comes from 2 Kings 14:25. Here it is. He is Jeroboam, restored the border of Israel from the entrance of Hamath unto the sea of the Arabah, according to the word of Jehovah, the God of Israel, which he spake by his servant Jonah, the son of Amittai, the prophet, who was of Gath-Hepher. Who is Jonah, the son of Amittai, the prophet, and where is Gath-Hepher? Because this is a big clue. Now, I want you to go with me to the beginning of the book of Jonah, which starts, Jonah 1:1 says the following: the word of Jehovah came unto Jonah, the son of Amittai. So that means that the Jonah of the book of Jonah fame is the same Jonah which uttered the prophecy that's mentioned in 2 Kings 14 and verse 25. And he's from Gath-Hepher. But where is that? If we knew where Gath-Hepher was, would be another step closer to solving the riddle. It's mentioned in one other text. The one other text that mentions this location is Joshua chapter 19 and verse 13. And there we're talking about the allotment of certain lands to certain tribes. And in this case, in a section that deals with the allotment of land that's assigned to the tribe of Zebulun, it mentions Gath-Hepher. Now, this is interesting because the region that's associated with the tribe of Zebulun borders what is the tribe of Naphtali. Both of these, this entire area that's being described, is located immediately west of the Sea of Kinnereth, which is also known as the Sea of Galilee. Now, if you search, and this is outside the scope of the video, but if you search and read Isaiah chapter 9, you'll find something very interesting about a redemption that begins in the region just described. People that were in darkness see a great light. But I want you to look at a map. And on the map, I want you to focus on that region west of the Sea of Galilee, the land of Zebulun, the land of Naphtali. And I want you to find a location. I want you to look until you find Gath-Hepher. And then you may have to look at another map because that's going to be the Hebrew Bible. I want you to now look at a map associated with the Gospels, the New Testament. Maybe your Bible map will say the land of Israel in the time of Christ. Who knows? But I want you now to look for Nazareth. And if you put those maps side by side and you look at them, you're going to find that they are very, very close. Now, here's the deal. We don't know exactly with precision where town center is on ancient Gath-Hepher. And we don't know exactly, precisely, where town center of Nazareth is. But even using conservative estimates by some of the greatest cartographers and scholars, they would place these two places, Gath-Hepher and Nazareth, about 2 miles apart, about 3 to 5 kilometers, maybe even closer. Who knows? Now, this area, according to the pen of ancient scribes, the ones that produced the biblical records, this according to them, is a land of miracles, a land where miracles occur often. Listen, I'm going to describe, I'll give you a couple of examples. In this area, a miraculous conception takes place. There is the report of a resurrection of someone who was dead. There's a miraculous feeding that involves multitudes being fed and having loaves of bread left after the miracle of feeding. Lepers are healed. The sight of the blind is restored. And all of the miracles that I just named, they don't even include those that are mentioned in the gospel accounts, and they are many. That's right. Everything that I just described, all of the miracles that I just talked about, the raising of the dead, the healing of the lepers, the restoration of sight of the blind, the multitude being fed with bread and having left over, none of that is in the New Testament that I'm describing. I'm describing events that are described in the Hebrew Bible. But all of that is secondary to a bigger question. Is there any way that I can show forth evidence of a Galilean prophet? Nay, even more specifically, can I provide evidence that Jonah, the son of Amittai from Gath-Hepher, can I show that he was raised from the dead? Consider this. In Jonah chapter 2, beginning in verse 2, and he said, this is Jonah praying, I called by reason of mine affliction unto Jehovah, and he answered me. Out of the belly of Sheol cried I, and thou heardest my voice, for thou didst cast me into the depth in the heart of the seas, and the flood was round about me, and all thy waves and thy billows passed over me. And I said, I am cast out from before thine eyes, yet I will look again toward thy holy temple. The waters compassed me about, even to the soul. The deep was round about me. The weeds were wrapped around my head. I went down to the bottom of the mountains. The earth with its bars closed upon me forever. Yet hast thou brought up my life from the pit, O Jehovah, my God. It says, this begins with a phrase in Hebrew, mi beten Sheol, from the belly of Sheol. Sheol is the grave. Sheol is the unseen realm. He's crying from hell or the grave. And then it says he's raised up. The interpretation, without even stretching things, is meant to present that Jonah was among the dead and he's brought back to life. But it's not just there. Tradition, according to rabbinic tradition, the miracle of Elijah in 1 Kings 17, beginning in verse 17, where it talks about a widow's son who is raised by Elijah. Rabbinic tradition says that that widow's son was none other than Elijah. And then, if that's not enough, another rabbinic legend, tradition says that Elisha's miracle in 2 Kings chapter 4, beginning in verse 18, of the Shunammite son who is raised by Elisha. Some religious traditions, according to Judaism, associate that child with Jonah. Now, so let me just put this to you this way. We now can move into having these traditions and these insights into the Gospel's narratives, briefly touching what is known as the sign of the prophet Jonah. In the synoptics, we have 4 references that I want to quickly go over. Now, if we begin with Mark, because generally Mark is considered to be the earliest text, we get the following in Mark chapter 8, beginning in verse 11. The Pharisees come forward. They ask Jesus for a sign from heaven. They're trying him. Now, he gets upset about this, and he actually tells them there shall be no sign given unto this generation. And Mark leaves it at that. He doesn't mention anything beyond an undescribed sign. No sign will be given. If we move into what we think are later stories related to the same sign, we get in Matthew chapter 16, beginning in verse 1, same story. Here it's Pharisees and Sadducees come to Jesus, and they ask him for a sign from heaven. Again, he's upset. He even says, you can discern the sky, the signs in the sky, but you're not even able to discern the signs of the times. And he goes on to say, an evil and adulterous generation seeks after a sign, but no sign shall be given, Matthew 16 says, but the sign of Jonah. But then it doesn't tell us what that sign is. So then we move into Luke, in Luke chapter 11, beginning in verse 29. Again, this time it's the multitude that are drawn to Jesus, and he begins to say, this generation is an evil generation. It seeks after a sign. And there shall no sign be given to it but the sign of Jonah. Now, Luke here tells us what that sign is. For even as Jonah became a sign unto the Ninevites, so shall also the Son of Man be to this generation. If I skip down to verse 32, it says, the men of Nineveh shall stand up in the judgment with this generation and shall condemn it, for they repented at the preaching of Jonah, and behold, a greater than Jonah is here. Here in Luke, Jonah himself is the sign, and his preaching and call to repentance. No belly of the fish, that comes now. In Matthew chapter 12, beginning in verse 38, same lead up as before. But when Jesus says, an evil and adulterous generation seeks after a sign, there shall no sign be given to this generation, but the sign of the prophet Jonah. For as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the fish, so shall the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. Then it goes through the same, the men of Nineveh will rise up, and no greater, and then it says, and a greater than Jonah is here. So we see a natural progression. In Mark, no Jonah at all. In Matthew, Jonah's mentioned, but no explanation, anything further about the sign. In Luke, Jonah and his prophetic mission is in fact a sign. And in Matthew chapter 12, the fact that he's in the belly of the fish for 3 days and 3 nights, that then becomes the focus. And that's what most people know. But there's much more to the sign of Jonah than 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of a fish or in the belly of Sheol. There's much, much more to the sign of the prophet Jonah. Resurrection of figures certainly plays in both of our story, whether through the text such as second chapter of Jonah or traditions according to the rabbis. Jonah is said to have risen from the dead, and Jesus, obviously, according to the writers of the gospel, is said to have risen from the dead as well. But to fully comprehend the signs, one really must learn to read between the lines. If you enjoyed reading between the lines with me, I'm going to ask you, if you've not already done so, to like and share the video, subscribe to the channel, and you might even consider being part of the Yachad, where you can join us on other tapings and recordings, just like we're doing this and all future studies together, and it's followed by questions and answers. So again, I'm Ross from HOREB Institute. Thanks for watching.